Hey guys, Dan here with Battlefield Curator. I found a really rare rifle about 7 years ago at a local shop. I was searching around my area as I usually do, and just so happens that this shop had got an estate of about 100 rifles, and a lot of them were pre-1968 imports, which meant that there was a lot of rare and interesting things in there. Now, at the time, a lot of these were still very high priced and sought after, and obviously I wasn't going to spend a whole bunch of money on a lot of these rifles. Well, after talking with the shop owner, he said he needed help identifying them, tagging them, and putting them on the rack, and I offered to help him in return get a discount on some of these rifles that he had. I think it was a win for him because he knew I was already a buyer because I had prior knowledge to what some of these were, and so I spent a few weeks helping him out, you know, maybe an hour here, an hour there. Ended up picking up a few rare rifles. One of them was this Mauser, and it just looks like a very beefy, shortened version of a K98K, but it's got Arabic all over it, so you might think it's a Turkish Mauser. At the time, I didn't really know what it was, and I knew it was something that you just don't see every day because of this really cool Lion Sun crest on the receiver. So I took some photos of it and sent it to some of my Arabic speaking friends. They pointed me to the right direction because they said this is not Arabic, this is Farsi. So I sent the photos to some of my Farsi speaking friends, and they kind of gave me a rundown of what it would roughly translate to. So obviously it's not a Turkish Mauser, but someone could probably get confused thinking that it was if they didn't do the proper research. Come to find out, after doing some research, this is a Persian Mauser M49. Now, if you look around online and in stores, you might find some of these. I don't think people really understand the true history behind it. So in this video, I'm going to go through some of the history that I've researched, some of the information that I've come across, and also go over their features and go over some of the collectability aspects of the Mauser M49. Alright, so when you first look at it, there are some very definitive features on the rifle. First of all, you'll notice that it is a little shorter than a K98K, and it's also got this really weird and interesting front sight protector. A lot of collectors that have really been in the game a while will be able to spot them because they're just so unique looking. So some of the things that the Mauser M49 is known for in the collector world is the huge fireball it produces. It shoots 8mm Mauser, and because it's so short, you just get this huge fireball out of it. Now, you might also notice that it has a K98K style sling assembly. There's supposed to be a little brass buckle that fits in the slot in that buttstock. So a lot of them might be missing this brass buckle, but you might be able to find some reproduction ones online. Now you'll notice there is also a bayonet lug. This specifically is for the Persian Mauser bayonet. Essentially, getting a closer look at these, there's two versions of the Mauser M49 that I've seen out there. Just gonna first go over the general appearance of what you might see from both of them, and then I'll go into the differences between the other ones that you'll see out there. All right, on the right side of the receiver, you're probably gonna notice some inspection marks, and on the left side, you'll see some inscription. Now, breaking it down from left to right, you'll have a serial number, and then you'll have a 2-digit number. That is presumed to be the last 2 digits of the year that that specific rifle was produced. This one is 29, which is 1329. If you convert it to the Gregorian calendar, it is 1950. So we can assume that this rifle was produced in 1950. Then next to the serial number, you'll notice some Farsi. This roughly translates to this M49 carbine was produced by the Persian Army at the Army Arms Factory. If you were going to read this more literally, you would have to read it from right to left. And the rightmost side, right here, literally translates to, well, in a rougher sense, model of short rifle or type of short rifle. Now, right here in the middle is the date, and that is actually read from left to right. This translates to 1327, which in English is literally 1949. And the last portion here, reading it from right to left, it literally translates to made by the weapons manufacturing of the army. Now these were made at the factory in Tehran, and you will notice that there is a T, a letter T proof mark on the rifle and the parts. Now some might assume that this is a crescent moon with a star, kind of like a Turkish Mauser, but it's not. If you notice, there's 2 dots here, and this is actually the letter T or T, which in Tehran, it starts with that letter. So this is more like a factory proof mark made in Tehran, kind of similar to how you might see some Czech rifles where it has a circle and a Z. So yeah, these M49s were actually made in Tehran, and they were made at the factory nicknamed Mauser Lion Sun, which essentially translates roughly to the machine gun factory. On the receiver, you'll also see that really cool lion, sword, and sun crest. It's very distinct and it just looks amazing. Definitely a standout feature that you can identify a Persian Mauser by. The rear sight on these will differ. I believe that during the early stages you might have seen Farsi, and then later on they switched them. Now I looked around online and I found the latest manufacture date to be 1970, but I would assume they continued production throughout the 70s, and even after the Ayatollah took over during the Iranian Revolution, they might have still continued making these rifles and carbines. All right, so going back to the differences between some of the 2 versions that I've seen out there, I'm going to call the first version the infantry carbine version. You're going to notice that it might have a buttstock number painted on there, or it might not have any buttstock number painted on there. These also might look a little rough, like they've seen some use, or they can still be in very good condition. Now the wood on both of these is a kind of indigenous wood, it seems. It's noted to be lighter than walnut. All right, this one does not have an import mark. I've not seen any with import marks. This one was most likely a pre-1968 import. Now there's also a chance that you can find some of these that were bringbacks from certain conflicts that occurred in the Middle East. All right, the second version of the M49 that I've seen out there is what I would call the presentation carbine. These ones were gifted to military officials, government officials, soldiers, pretty much people that were working in the Iranian embassy anywhere from the 1950s to the 1970s, right before the Iranian Revolution. You'll notice that these ones will have a distinct metal plate screwed onto the buttstock. The plate on this one is roughly translated to the production of weapons for the Imperial Iranian military. So essentially this plaque is just saying that this rifle was produced in Iran and it was for military use. Now some of these M49s were actually presented to high-ranking military officials of the US, and on the plates they'll actually be named to that individual and have a date of presentation of the rifle to that individual. So there was a guy on Reddit who posted about his M49, and it was specifically gifted to Colonel William A. McNulty. Colonel McNulty actually served as a battalion commander under General Patton's Third Army in World War II. There's a whole Wikipedia page on Colonel McNulty. So the guy that got this M49 has a genuine piece of military history. And just to let you guys know, if you ever come across some and you take pictures of them, let's say you don't know a Farsi linguist, and Google Translate kind of does a poor job of translating Farsi, you could try a different app, or you can go to like the Farsi Reddit page and see if you can get a hold of somebody on there that might be able to help you out. Now some of the presentation models will probably come in a wooden case, and they might have a bayonet, they'll probably have a sling, they might have some paperwork indicating that they were test fired, and this is what we found in one of them. All right, so now we got to take a look at some of the history behind the M49. For that, we have to go back to about the 1920s when Iran, or Persia at the time, as it was known, was ordering rifles from Czechoslovakia. Now these rifles from the Czechs were actually in really good quality, and the Persians really liked them, the military really liked them, so they adopted the VZ-24. They were also known to be very accurate as well, and they were very popular with tribe chiefs and tribal leaders and tribesmen. So a lot of these people actually sought after some of these Czech Mausers. Now later on, they would order what was known as the Model 30, which was a shortened and beefy looking carbine specifically for the Iranian contract, but it was still made in Czechoslovakia. These small carbines became extremely popular and very sought after. They were great for mounted troops. Overall, the fit and finish was of high quality and really smooth. All right, in 1935, Reza Shah, who was the ruler of Persia at the time, officially changed the name of the country to Iran. Now, during World War II in 1941, the Allied forces invaded Iran in order to prevent German influences, the German military from using trade routes and using the routes for supplies, and also the vital oil resources. So during occupation, there was a little bit of influence from the Allied powers. After World War II, the US sought to have more diplomatic relations with Iran, and they set up an embassy. In 1951, the Embassy of the United States, Tehran, was built and completed. Now, just prior to that, the Czechs actually came in and helped set up and establish and build a factory for rifle production. This is the one I was referring to before, known as the Mauser Lion Sun. Now, at that factory was where the production of Mauser rifles would take place, and so you had Persian Mausers that were made there. You had a licensed copy of a VZ-24 that was made there. They're really rare. And you also had a copy of the Czech Model 30, which would be known as the Mauser M49. Now, this Mauser M49 carbine would be used throughout a lot of the conflicts in the Middle East. We would probably see the carbine used with mounted troops, tribal leaders, tribesmen, maybe some support troops. I haven't really found much evidence of its use with a lot of the troops. Now, there's actually a really popular photo that shows the Mauser M49 carbine in use by a child soldier. This photo was taken during the Iran-Iraq War. The photo was actually taken by Alfred Yagobzadeh in 1980. Now, the child in the photo was 13 at the time, and his name is Hassan Zhangju. Now, Hassan Zhangju was part of the Resistance Mobilization Force, which is kind of like a National Guard, I would say. Maybe just like a reserve force. Sadly, he was killed in action in 1984. This photo was actually shown on the front cover of some magazines, and it won him some awards. It's on his website, so you can go check it out, as well as some other Iran-Iraq War photographs that he took. So now we have to go look at the collectability of these Mauser M49s. As stated before, you're probably going to find some that were imported pre-1968 without import marks. There's probably like a very few amount out there that were bringbacks during military conflicts in the Middle East. And a lot of them that you might also find out there will be the presentation versions with the plaque on the buttstock, and those were gifted to personnel working at the Iranian embassy from the 1950s to the 1970s. Now, as I kind of stated before, there was an Iranian Revolution, which happened in 1979. That was where you kind of saw royalty get dethroned and the Islamic Republic took over. Essentially, more of the westernized views were looked down upon and ousted. That was also about the time that there was the Iranian hostage crisis, and that was at the US Embassy. So after that conflict, there was no more US in the US Embassy. And since then, the US Embassy has apparently been converted to some kind of military building or government building, and also a museum. All right, as a collector, if you're gonna go look for these, yeah, you probably scour the internets. You probably scour your common websites that auction some of these fine pieces. Some of the auction sites might have them for a higher dollar amount. Some auction websites might actually have them for a cheaper amount. The best place to probably get them is from private party. You might go to some of your local shops, but they're hard to find, they're rare, and you're probably better off looking for them online if you really want to add it to your Mauser collection. Now, when it comes to Persian Mausers, they are really sought after by collectors because of their distinct aesthetics. We're talking about that front sight protector. They're really smooth, they're really accurate, and for the most part, some of them are in really good condition. You know, when it comes to being a Mauser collector or a military surplus rifle collector, you're going to look at these Persian Mausers, especially the M49 carbine, with a lot of prestige. You got to remember that Iran was very westernized prior to the Iranian Revolution. So as a collector, you might say, hey, these Mausers were from a certain period in time when the US and Iran had really good relations, and the history of Iran being a little bit more westernized during the 1950s and 1970s. So it's a really interesting piece for that specific time period. Now, there's probably a lot more history out there about the Mauser M49. Also, some of the information in this video might not be 100% accurate. So if anyone out there really knows more about these Mausers, please just put in the comments so we can get a collective history. That's kind of why I added collaborative study to the title, because there's just so much more out there to learn. And if there's enough information I can find out there in the comment sections here, then I will make a second video with more interesting history tied to the Mauser M49. So if you have any knowledge at all, whether you lived in Iran at the time, or you served downrange and you seen him, or you knew somebody, or your father had one gifted to him while he was working at the embassy, just let me know in the comment section. Appreciate it. Now, if you like this video and you want to see more, help support the channel by checking out the merchandise website. Get yourself a really cool Battlefield Curator t-shirt or hoodie or jacket. And as always, be sure to learn history and curate history. Pulverize the like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Make it a great day.